Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Moody, for what purpose?
the gentleman yield for some questions.
Paddie,
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Paddie. I appreciate that. I want to be very clear about what this does, because I think there's some legitimate disagreement. This amendment requires schools to provide single occupancy facilities for students who do not wish to use multi-occupancy facilities that match their so-called biological sex. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's spelled out in the bill, or in the amendment.
It says, and I would add, and for those that are reading, single occupancy facilities for this particular section as it relates to this amendment would also include a multi-occupancy facility only if the use occurs when no other person is there. Because, and let me give you an example of that, Mr. Moody. I represent a lot of small school districts, and so certainly we don't want to put our school districts in a situation where they can't accommodate that. You know, if we got much more descriptive in this, I think we would begin to put further burdens on our school districts, frankly. And so you could very well have, and I would have examples of this in my district, small schools where you may have a changing facility that in first period, that's the boys' changing facilbe. In third period, that's the girls' changing facility.
Understood.
And so we want to make sure we want to make sure that we empower them to be as flexible as possible.
So, and this is what I really want to pin down, because I think their language is unclear. Does the language mean that those students who do not wish to use those facilities that match their so-called biological sex, does that mean they have to use it? Is it a requirement that they have to use those facilities?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry.
Does that mean that those students have to use it?
Describe to me again the kid that you're, specifically the type of kid you're...
Well, we're talking about a child.
Right.
Here's an example. You have a transgender student born female transitioning to male. Mm-hmm. Under this amendment, can that student use the boys' room, the girls' room, or a single occupancy restroom as the student feels is appropriate in his situation?
No. If they are biologically considered to be a female, they must use that. Otherwise, there will be accommodations made for them to use a single occupancy facility or a multi-occupancy facility.
Now, Mr. Paddie, we heard earlier in questions that I directed to Chairman Bonin that this bill was about, the bill as filed and as brought to the floor is about disasters and terror attacks and emergencies. How does your amendment fit into this bill?
I think it's absolutely about child safety.
And you think that you know, I think you've seen the news, and it was laid out by Senator Taylor when he presented this bill in the Senate committee about some boys that were about to commit Columbine-like shootings. So school shootings are things that are common in the news. In fact, just this week, one of my schools back home was on lockdown over a gun situation, and that's what these plans are supposed to encompass. How many transgender students have attacked anyone in a bathroom at a Texas school?
Mr. Moody, I'm not advised.
Okay, so you cannot cite to me one example?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir.
Okay. In fact, are you aware that the only data we have about transgender students are involved in harassment and violence and bullying and sex crimes in bathrooms are them as victims?
I'm not advised. I'd have to take your word on that. But Mr. Moody, again, I would
So I ask you this, based on that, and not being able to cite one example, where's the emergency?
Where's the emergency?
Where's the emergency for this amendment?
I'm not saying there's emergency. I'm saying
you
that
said
we're
that this
concerned
is
about it's about child safety. It is, in fact. It's about the safety, Mr. Moody, of that same child that you just referenced, that is a transgender child that's assaulted. It's about that student as well. This amendment treats all students the same.
Well, no, it doesn't. That is not accurate description of this amendment. Where is the disaster that we are trying to avoid with this amendment? Because that's what the bill is about. It's about emergencies and disasters. Where's the disaster that this amendment addresses?
Mr. Moody, when we're trying to address particular issues, this is an education bill. I am seeking to address child safety within the education realm, and so just like we all have done on many of occasions, this is the vehicle for this effort. And so I'm not telling you there's some great emergency as would be a part of the original intent of this bill. This is an amendment specific to child safety as it relates to these facilities.
And these types of plans we are trying to lay out a command and control element so that we know what to do in emergencies, disasters, in threats of terrorism. I mean, would you disagree that that's what this bill is doing?
I'm not arguing at all the original intent of this bill, Mr. Moody. This is specific to child safety as it relates to these facilities. And I would argue also that those issues, if a child is assaulted, that's pretty serious as well. I think you would agree.
There are criminal sanctions available under current law if there is an assault. This amendment, as you laid out, it does provide for an accommodation. Is that correct?
Absolutely, for all children.
And it would give transgender students the option of a separate single occupancy bathroom. Is that correct?
Absolutely. They would need to make whatever accommodations are necessary.
And would that bathroom have to be equal to the bathroom of other students?
Equal in what way?
Well, you say all students are going to be treated fairly. If a student wants to use a single occupancy bathroom and ask for that accommodation, which I believe the amendment does envision, must that bathroom be equal to the bathrooms that are available to everyone else?
I'm not sure specifically what you're trying to get at, Mr. Moody. I mean,
Equality is what I'm trying to get at.
You know, whether or not it has the same type of toilets or sinks, you know, obviously that's not going to be universal across all school districts. And so, you know, I would certainly assume that they would take as good a care of that single occupancy as they would a multi-occupancy.